Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Gosh, that lady has such an amazing voice, doesn't she? What's up, guys? It's Darren. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. Hope that intro got you fired up. This week, we're continuing our MBA career series, and I brought on another dear friend who I've known for many, many years to talk about MBA careers in investment banking. And my good friend Scott attended Stanford University. He played professional baseball for, I believe, 5-6 years for the Toronto Blue Jays before heading to Wharton and then transitioning into a career in investment banking. Scott is now at Wells Fargo Securities, where he's a vice president. And I just really love this conversation in particular. I think you can hear Scott's passion for the industry, but more importantly, he really lays out what the recruiting process is if you want to get into investment banking, what types of applicants succeed in that process, and a whole lot more. I learned so much during this 1-hour conversation, and I think any of you considering a career in investment banking after getting your MBA will really benefit from all the knowledge that Scott shares in this episode. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Of course, at Touch MBA, if you need help with school selection, figuring out which school best fits you and your career goals, go head over to touchmba.com. We'd be glad to give you some free expert help over there. I also want to thank Ohio State Fisher for sponsoring this episode. Ranked among the top public universities in the U.S., the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business provides an outstanding MBA experience tailored to your interests and leadership development. Whether switching careers, enhancing a career, or starting a business, an MBA from Fisher provides tomorrow's leaders with the knowledge and skills to succeed today. Visit fisher.osu.edu to learn more about Fisher's personalized MBA program and competitive scholarship opportunities. Let's just dive into this episode. Here we go. This is a really special episode for me because the guest who I've invited on the show today is a longtime friend, one of my best friends, in fact, from high school. We've known each other for over 25 years. Pretty scary, actually, but I'm just really excited to have him on the show. Scott, welcome to the Touch MBA podcast.
Darren, I'm really excited to talk to you. We are on other sides of the world right now, but this is a great excuse to get caught up and looking forward to talking about investment banking and recruiting and all that good stuff.
So let's first start with your story. What were you doing before business school? Where did you go to business school? And what have you done since?
All right. My favorite part, I get to talk about myself. The way I think about MBA recruiting is there's probably a couple different buckets of applicants. I was in the non-traditional background bucket because I played professional baseball before business school. I played baseball in the Toronto Blue Jays organization for 6 seasons. I retired in 2007. And in 2007, I looked around and said, okay, now what? And I started and ran my own business for about 1.5 years. And after trying really hard and not making any money, I said, you know what, let me kind of hit the reset button here and apply to business school. So I was fortunate enough to get into Wharton. I graduated from Wharton in 2011. 2011, time flies. In 2011, I'm born and raised in Southern California.
Yep.
And so Wharton was kind of my trip towards the East Coast, and then started my career in investment banking in New York after finishing Wharton in 2011.
First question, what do investment bankers do?
That is a great question, and I didn't know to start this whole thing. So that's a great way to kick us off. let me take one more second to talk about kind of my path through business school.
Yes.
So I entered business school really as I mentioned, is kind of a career reset. You know, I was very passionate about entrepreneurship. I'd run my own business for a couple years. I enjoyed it, but I just kind of wanted to see what else was out there. And so in business school, I really took the opportunity to learn about as many career paths as I could. And I use that as the backdrop because I really didn't know much about investment banking starting at Wharton. I will say that a lot of my classmates knew very clearly what investment banking was. And I think there are pros and cons to that understanding, frankly. But I really kind of learned about the industry going through working at the, career center, doing my own research, talking to friends, and kind of figuring out what I thought my skill set, how it matched with a certain career path. But I did a lot of interviewing. I really started thinking about tech. So I interviewed at Google and Microsoft, VMware, PayPal, and then also went through the consulting ringer. So interviewed at Bain and McKinsey, and that whole fun path of interviewing, and then really kind of settled on investment banking the second year of business school, which I think we're going to get into this in the podcast, but there's a couple different paths that you can take. My path was probably not as mainstream as some of the others, and it worked out fine. But I definitely want to talk a lot about what the opportunities are in business school and where they start.
Yeah, well, let's talk about those paths. Let's start there.
Okay. So let me take a step back about investment banking because you really asked, I think the last question was, what do you do as an investment banker? I don't know if I totally got there, but I'm going to first start with kind of, as a business school student, what are the options for learning and interviewing in investment banking? So to start there, there's really kind of two mainstream, I'll call them, paths to enter the investment banking profession or career path. One is as an undergrad, entering as an analyst. The second is after your MBA, entering as an associate. So if you think about the job titles or the levels of investment banking, there's analyst, associate, vice president, director, and managing director. So your analysts, and the traditional analyst program is a 2-year program with an optional third year. They're 21, 22, 23-year-old kids just finishing up undergrad. And your associates are, however old you are when you graduate from business school. I was probably a little older than the average, and I kind of started at about 30.
Yeah.
But the age of business school varies, and so you can really kind of start anywhere in that spectrum. The other option to get to associate besides starting after your MBA is you get promoted as an analyst. You get promoted to an associate. They call that A to A. Mm-hmm. But I really think it feels like for this audience, we're really going to be focusing on finish your MBA, start as a first-year associate. The associate program, it depends on the shop where you end up, but call it 3 or 4 years is kind of the usual length as an associate. And then you'd be up for promotion, and there is a ton of job turnover in this industry. We can talk a little bit about why that is. So, but you can either get promoted to VP, or a lot of investment bankers kind of use the foundation that they learn as an investment banker and then go on to the next stage of their life. And that could be going to industry. It could work for corporate development. It could go to private equity. There's a lot of different paths. But let me go back there and really quickly to what an investment banker does, because that was your question. I think this is really important. So I think you hear a ton of acronyms in this industry, just like you do in all of the different industries. And for whatever reason, bankers just love to use this banker speak that can be kind of challenging at times. But if you kind of simplify what we do, I think there's really 3 products that we provide our clients. We are a client-facing business, so we work with business owners, CEOs, CFOs, decision makers in business to really provide 3 buckets of services. That's mergers and acquisition, or M&A advisory, and that could be either on buying a company or selling your company. So that's M&A, that's bucket 1. Bucket 2 would be debt. And you can there's different tranches of debt, but really you're talking about a kind of a syndicated bank facility, term loan B market. You can talk about high yield or investment grade bonds. And happy to go into more detail if we feel that's appropriate on this podcast. And then the third bucket is equity capital markets, which is really accessing equity capital, which could either be public equity, so helping a company IPO, or helping an existing public company execute a follow-on offering, or it could also be private equity. So those are kind of the three buckets. And you, as an MBA student, kind of need to think about a couple different parameters as you consider this career. And one of those parameters is, do you want to be focused on one of those three buckets? Or do you want to take the second kind of path, which is, I'm not going to be a product banker. I'm not going to focus on one of those specific sets of services. Rather, I'll focus on an industry that will really access kind of all three of those buckets of services. So that's really kind of what we do. We help clients raise capital or buy and sell other companies, which, depending on how you look at it, is kind of raising capital in a certain way.
Yeah. That's super clear. This is great. So what are the most common types of investment banking jobs for MBA grads? Like, do they usually go more into one of those three products or into industries, as you mentioned? What is kind of the lay of the land?
So that's a great question. And I think it really depends on the student. So looking back at my career, I kind of kicked us off by saying I wasn't really sure what investment bankers did when I started. I'm still figuring it out after year 7 here. But but honestly, I really didn't have a clear view. Some MBA students have a very clear view what they want to do. So let me give you an example. A lot of my classmates said, I want to go into investment banking and I want to focus on the debt product. And the reason I want to focus on understanding debt is because I want to know how to structure debt. I want to know the terms. I want to know what the market says on pricing, so that I'm going to be an expert in raising debt, so that in 2 or 3 or 4 years, I'm going to then switch careers and go to private equity. Because really what private equity does is they are principal investors. They put their equity capital to work, but lever up a company. They put debt on that business such that they own the equity, but lever it up so that they use the cash flows of the business to service that debt. So having an understanding of that debt structure and terms and investors and that class of capital is very advantageous for a private equity investor. It maybe seems a little bit backwards because you're an equity investor, but understanding the debt product is really important. So in that example, a student could have a very clear view on what they want to do and therefore tailor their investment banking opportunity list based on what they want to accomplish. I was not that. What do I like about investment banking? I liked the finance. I learned a lot of it in business school. I wasn't previously exposed to a ton of it. I liked the exposure to business. So if you think about who you're talking with, you're talking about decision makers. I'll give you an example. It was literally my first week on the job in New York. And my boss took me along to a short line rail operator. So if you think about the rail landscape, there's a couple big, what they call class 1 rails. And then there's a handful of these short line rail operators, but there's not that many in the continental US. And I sat around this table with my boss who'd done transportation investment banking for 25 years. I was talking to the CEO and owner of the business whose dad had started the business, and he'd been running the business for 35 plus years. Jeez. And I was talking, and then the fourth guy at the table was the CFO who had been the right-hand man for the CEO for the last 15 or 20 years. And me, right? So I'm looking around this table and I'm like, holy cow, like this is an incredible opportunity. I'm hearing about the direction of an industry from the very people that are driving that industry. And isn't that neat, right? So that was really what attracted me to investment banking. I didn't know what product I wanted to do. I teased there. I ended up in transportation investment banking to start. But the reason I took that job is because that was the available job. Like, I like any other young boy. I like trains and trucks and stuff. But, I didn't know anything about the industry, right? So really, I took the opportunity because it was what was available. I learned to really enjoy the industry, but what I wanted to do was be exposed to the financial concepts and be exposed to business. And that's why I started investment banking. Could I have had a great career in equity capital markets? Yeah, probably. Or M&A or debt. Yeah. TMT, technology, media and telecom, probably. Consumer, any of those things probably would have worked for me. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think I'd ask your audience, really think, is there an objective that I am looking to accomplish? Or do I kind of think of myself as a more kind of starting general? In which case, we can talk about some of the, maybe the strengths and considerations of each of the buckets, but, picking the right bucket probably is less relevant if you don't have a specific objective in mind.
Got it. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And can we go through your recruiting process as someone who had no background, right, in this industry, was learning all about it at Wharton? Yeah. What is the recruiting process like? Is it connected to what you do during your summer internship? Is that critical? Yeah. Please tell us.
Yeah. And I'll come at this from two angles. One, I'll talk about my specific example. And then secondly, now I mentioned that this is year number 7 for me in investment banking. I've been doing recruiting on, the recruiter side now for 7 years.
Perfect.
So I have a very a clear understanding of how it runs within the structure. I probably should have mentioned up front, I work for Wells Fargo Securities, which is the investment banking arm of Wells Fargo. I'll tell you how we do it. I'll also, have a lot of friends and colleagues at, Goldman, JP Morgan, Citi, Morgan Stanley. So I have a view on how they do it at different firms, but I know Wells Fargo Securities best. So, all right. So let me talk to you about my path. So I mentioned to you, I really came into business school with my options open. I will give the guidance to your listeners that business school for me was a transformative 2 years. It was the perfect fit for where I was. Get ready when you start business school because job hunting starts almost immediately. And I had no idea. Like it was day one and everyone said, wow, let's meet what we called your cohort. And we did fun games and, did these different things to meet one another. And it seemed like day 2, it was like, okay, let's start looking for jobs. So just buckle up for that. Yeah. And investment banking is one of the industries. I would say consulting is the other big bucket. There are others, but those are the two biggest ones that I went through that have very structured processes on campus. We'll talk a little bit about different campuses. I wouldn't say every campus has the structured process, but Wharton definitely did. So consulting and investment banking, day one, you're already kind of thinking there's information sessions, there's representatives on campus, there's coffee chats, there's all these different things that, really looking, at it from the recruiting side now that the banks are doing just to get exposed to the student body. Like they just want to know who the candidates are. And I'll tell you an observation that I've made over the 7 years I've been here is the recruiting cycle is moving earlier and earlier and earlier. I find it unbelievable at how much we try to speed it up. And if you think about it from the bank shoes, they're just trying to get the best talent available. And so if Goldman's on campus a week before us, we're going to go a week before them. And then they're going to go a week before us. And it just keeps moving up. So get ready. However, my path was not that. My path, as I mentioned, was, let me think about, I want to take classes and I want to figure out what's out there and meet my classmates. And, I wanted to do tech because I liked my iPhone and I thought that made me qualified to be a coder or something.
And you had been an entrepreneur for a couple of years.
And I had been an entrepreneur. So that was an angle that I definitely pursued all throughout business school. Yeah. So that whole first year was really just kind of trying a bunch of different things. Year 2 is when I really kind of got focused on investment banking. Another word of warning, that is not the highest probability of landing an investment banking job. I would highly recommend against that. If you are one of the students that says, I'm really interested in this industry and I want to give it a shot, you need to do everything you can to prepare as soon as possible. You need to be ready to go as you walk onto campus day one. And we can talk about some of the ways to be ready. But my path was a little different. So let me talk about what that did to me. So the kind of the structured process for investment banking is early on in year 1, you do these information session and these coffee chats and these get to know you type events. Then there's a resume drop depending on where you are. Then depending on the school, there might be some like over the phone type interviews. And then there'll be like an on-campus interview day, and it's intense. So I went through this day year 2, but year 1 is just as intense and maybe more intense. You and your classmates look on the list and it's like, there's 6 interviews at Goldman and, you're in slot 3 and it's like slot 1's done, slot 2, and then that person walks out the door, you walk in the door, right? And then you're out and slot 4 is walking in. Like it's an intense block. And we can talk a little about the types of questions, but, there's a kind of a technical part and there's a, more of a fit part. But, that you do all of this interviewing in order to land a summer internship. So then between your first year of business school and your second year of business school, you go and work for the summer, and it depends on the internship, but it's usually like, 8-9 week internship, something like that. There's usually a little bit of a training session to start for a couple days, but then you're on the ground working on projects, learning the industry. If you're an industry banker, you're learning the product. If you're a product banker and you're really hands-on, you're working on all of the deals that come through and the pitches and everything else. And that is the best way to land a full-time, because if you do well in your internship, you work to secure a full-time offer. If it's done properly, you sign your letter before you step onto campus for the first day of year 2. You've already got that lined up. You go back to business school, you enjoy yourself, you travel, you take your classes, and knowing that when you finish business school in a year, you've got a spot waiting for you. That is the highest probability, because what banks will do, Wells Fargo Securities included, what we'll do is we'll have an entire class that we need. And we need, I don't know the number last year, but it's something like, 60, 70, 80 associates across our platform. It's a large number of spots to fill. Yeah. Now, if you think about the number of business school students, it's a small percentage, of course, but that's when the pool is the largest. And like I said, we are all competing for top talent, all of the investment banks. So we're running at those students. So if you think about a negotiating situation, you as the student, a talented MBA student that presents well and interviews well, you really have the power that first year. What happened to me was year 2 is I kind of realized, I think this is an interesting industry and I'd really like to get going. In order for me to land a job starting second year, it needs to be kind of a one-off hire, which happened, and that's how I got my job. But an associate at an existing platform decided he was ready to go do the next stage in life. He gave his 2 weeks notice. That team said, wait a second, we have a spot to fill. We've already filled everyone with the traditional process, so this is kind of a one-off process. That's how I got my job. As you can tell, the percentages of hitting that are much, much smaller. I feel very fortunate to have landed here. It's a lot of good luck. But that's my path. But I wanted to make sure to outline I don't want to call it the proper path. It's just the highest probability is the traditional route.
Yes. But you can still interview with these banks your second year. There's still slots. Quote unquote, open.
There are slots, and then there's
just a number less of them.
There's a number of reasons why slots can open up. So I'll use an example from the New York office. So it depends on the bank, and different banks have different reputations when it comes to this. But most of the banks will hire 2 summer associates, I shouldn't say 2. We hire 2, but hire the same number of summer associates as there are full-time spots available. There are some banks that will hire, more interns than they have full-time slots available. It creates a very competitive environment, obviously, for that summer internship.
Yeah.
It's neither good nor bad. You as the candidate should probably just do your homework and know that going in. So if you go to a shop that that there's 5 summers, but there's 2 spots available, you get another offer where there's 2 summers and 2 spots available. That should just go into your math about thinking about how you want to approach this. I'm not saying, you need to go one path or the other. I just think you should consider it.
Yeah.
But yes, so one option is, the summers go through and the summer doesn't work out for a variety of reasons. The place or the summer associate says, this just isn't right for me, or the bank says, this isn't the right fit. So they have an empty spot. That for sure will happen. It just goes, if you have 70 slots available, now you're down to 15. So it's 15 open spots rather than the original 70. Your probability just goes down. And then the other option would be what happened to me, which is the numbers just change. So, they hired summer internships thinking that this was the number of spots they needed. A year later, they realize that there is, that the needs are different. This might be a time, Darren, just to jump in and throw one more concept, just in case everyone's not completely confused by that.
No, this is crystal clear. Yeah.
Okay, good. Glad you think so. So what I've spoken to so far is what I would call bulge bracket investment banking.
Right.
So bulge bracket the way I define it, and people define it different ways, but really I think of it as an investment bank that provides the full suite of investment banking products. So I mentioned the three buckets: M&A, debt, equity, right?
Yeah.
Any shop that provides all of those, right? So I named, a lot of them, but that's Goldman, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Citi, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. There's others that I'm forgetting, but that have all three of those. I would call that bulge bracket. Everything I've talked to this point is really focused on that structured recruiting process from those bulge bracket investment banks. The other option to get in this industry, and I pursued this very heavily my second year, and you'll understand why when I explain it, is boutique investment banks. Mm-hmm. Boutique investment banks usually, not all of them, but usually will focus exclusively on M&A. And within M&A, they focus on sell-side M&A. So that means they advise a company on selling themselves, right? So there are some big shots out there like Houlihan, Harris Williams. Those are bigger platforms, but they really focus on just one product. And then there are investment banking shops that'll have, three bankers. And all they do is, you just think about the economics. If there's three bankers, you close a couple $1 million transactions and those three bankers make a very nice living, right? Yeah. So, and really what they're focused on is smaller sell side engagement. So you'll go to a business owner who owns, a company that makes something and you approach them and say, look, I started my career at Citigroup and learned the ropes there. I opened this shop 7 years ago. We've sold 15 companies over the last 3 years. We're very experienced. We know the buyers. We want an efficient process, and we're a lot cheaper than Wells Fargo Securities. But all they can do is advise on the sell side, right? Whereas what I do as an investment banker at Wells Fargo Securities, which I love this aspect of the business, I walk into a room and sit down with an owner, a CEO, and I say, tell me about your business. What do you need? What are your objectives? If it's a privately held, family-run business, do you have kids? Are they interested in running the business? Yes or no? Are you looking to grow your business? Do you want to hold all of the equity? You like to take some chips off the table? We can talk about, it becomes about what they want, and you provide a solution to that owner. Sell-side M&A is an incredibly valuable product. I think you can make the argument that in a lot of ways it's the best product for a young banker, and we can talk more about that. But it is one specific part of the broader investment banking and capital markets kind of industry and product set. So I bring all that up because we've talked a lot about the bulge bracket process.
Right.
The boutique process is different, and there isn't a structured process. They're not on campus doing coffee chats. So you talk about second year, you ask me about opportunities second year. I mean, the boutiques aren't even on campus. And by the way, that first year, they didn't even know what they needed. So a year later, they realized my, 6-man shop needs more support at the associate level.
Right.
Now I have a need. Now and oftentimes they're not even going to show up on campus. It really takes that M&A or MBA student to be calling around and making connections and figuring out someone who has a need. So there's that whole path, which by the way, I pursued as you'd expect, because I was not banking on the bulge bracket to work out. It did, which was lucky, but there's a whole nother path, and it's a really more kind of self-guided as an MBA student.
Yes.
You got to do the research. You got to make the connections, but there's a lot of really great opportunities out there with that path as well.
And does a school like Wharton kind of help make those avenues clearer in terms of those boutiques? Because clearly there's the structure there for the bulge brackets, right? But for those boutiques, is it really, you got to go discovering?
Yes and no. So, I think, yes, there are resources available. There was a lady at the Career Center at Wharton who I became very close with second year. I seemed like I was in her office about every week. But the reality is, at a place like Wharton where there's 800 kids in the class, and a lot of them are pursuing finance careers. Yes, she was very helpful, and I would never, diminish the importance of her in my process. But you need to do it yourself. There's no one who is looking out for you in your career like you are.
Yeah.
And there are people to help, but don't expect someone to kind of lay it on a silver platter for you. I think part one of how Wharton helped was this kind of career center and direction that it helped, me kind of gain my perspective. But probably number two, and probably more importantly, was I just think that when I started making my calls, if I called a Wharton alum and said, "Hey, I'm a second year Wharton student," 99% of those people took
that's
calls.
Amazing.
Right. I mean, and that's really the value. I mean, and people say it's probably cliche. What is the value of business school? Is it the classes? You learn in classes, right? But it's really the network you develop. And that was a prime example of how the network works. And I will tell you today, now being on the other side of the equation here, when I get that call and it's a Wharton MBA student or a Wharton undergrad calls, "Hey, I found your name on the Wharton Alumni Network. I'd love to just pick your brain." I mean, I had so much help when I went through that process. I will never turn down that call.
That is really amazing. I wish I had that network. but
that's a good point, Darren. And you do have a network, and all of your listeners do too. And I think one of the things that is a great exercise early on is to exercise your brain and figure out, what is my network?
Yeah.
Right. Because we all have these connections through life, and sometimes it's clear, like business school, undergrad. But other times it's less so, a family friend or someone in a finance department or, coworkers, ex-coworkers. I mean, you do that exercise and really figure out who you can call. I called a lot of my undergrad buddies, a lot of whom ended up in finance. And when I made these calls, number one, I think it was great just to catch up. And I'd been out of touch with them for, I haven't talked in, I don't know how long that was, but 8-10 years. And it was good to catch up. And then it was just amazing how many guys or men and women I would talk to, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, I started my career in investment banking, did it for a year and a half, and it wasn't right for me or left." Or, "Oh, one of my close friends is at Citi right now. Why don't you let me connect you with him or her?" Like just, so doing that exercise, I think it was kind of eye-opening to realize that we all have our networks.
Yeah.
One of, I think, the great aspects of Wharton, and there are pros and cons to this, is Wharton is a large class. And because of that, I think it's a broad network. But some of the connections that I've seen from students who went to a smaller, either undergrad or MBA program, I think those connections are even stronger in a lot of ways, and that can add value as well. So you got to exercise that network. I'm not an expert at it. I will tell you, there are a ton of books and study guides on how to network and stuff. And some of it I think is a little corny, but thinking about how to network and how to stay connected, I think is definitely worth the time.
Yeah. And we'll probably be like one of the defining, if not the defining asset that we'll have, like moving into this era of automation and just with all the changes happening in the world, like that people are so important.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Let's talk about now that you actually recruit from business schools. For Wells Fargo, like what are you looking for in hires? And, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the process too. And you can speak, of your company or investment banking in general, but, I'd love to hear. Yeah. Let's dive in.
That's a great one. I wish that, everyone always says this, I wish there was a magic list, but I do have some thoughts around this that I think would be helpful. So Wells Fargo rolled out something that, they really they rolled out to everyone who is recruiting focused last year. And it was a really interesting exercise. It was a bunch of different levels. We did multi-day courses on something called unbiased conscious training. And what the training really was is when you start talking to people, and they were doing it in a recruiting context, but being aware of everyone's unconscious biases. Can we always do that? Of course not. But I bring that up because I think the best path, honestly, is be yourself and don't try to present yourself as the way you think the person interviewing wants to hear it. I will tell you the first thing I I start at the top of the resume with school, because I'm always interested in school and with friends spread out over time. I think it's fun to start there. But the next spot I go in the resume is always the very bottom in interests, because it's just, what are you passionate about? Is it cooking? Is it traveling? Is it language? Is it, that really tells me more about the person than I did X, Y, and Z finance job for 3 years, or I was
interesting
KPMG,
Whoa.
And so I think you asked me kind of what I look for. I look for someone who I think has a passion for something. What makes a good associate? Honestly, I think if I was to rank kind of criteria, one would be you just need to be, call it a go-to person or trustworthy or just able to handle tasks. And it doesn't have to be necessarily hard tasks. I mean, yes, we're going to run cash flow modeling and analyze leverage and coverage statistics on a company out into 5-10 years in the future. And there's math involved with that, and it's technical and challenging. But it's not that hard, right? I mean, it's adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. There's a couple exponents thrown in there, but the math's not hard. The caliber of students we see, you can learn that part. What I look for is someone who I know I could say, look, we've got a meeting tomorrow. It's in the middle of Nebraska. We've got 12 books that need to be printed. They need to look right. They need to show up to the meeting on time. And I know with certainty that person's going to get that job done. And if you just think about, your friends, Darren, and the people on the podcast, there are people in your life that you're like, yep, no doubt that will be done right. And it'll be done on time. And there are other people in life that you'll say, really smart, but I don't know if I would put my name on the line or my job on the line with them executing something like that. Right. So I think that needs to come across. You need to prep for the technical stuff which happy to talk a little bit about, but you want to be yourself. You want to show how you're passionate. You don't want to pretend you're not, pretend you're someone who you're not. And then you need to show that you can just get stuff done. And like I said, it doesn't have to be hard stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, any other top line things you're looking for?
Yeah, I think, this is kind of cliche, but it's true. I think it's kind of an ability to handle pressure or adversity. And one of the ways I think everyone should realize that interviewers will do that is purposely be challenging in the interview.
Yeah.
When I interviewed at Wells Fargo, I interviewed with three gentlemen. One was my ultimate boss. The second was and I then interviewed with two group heads, which at the time I was kind of felt like I got the short end of the stick because these guys were very senior members of the bank. But now I'm actually very thankful because, I've created a connection with these guys over time. But one ran the financial sponsors group and one ran the TMT, Technology, Media, and Telecom group. And the TMT guy, so I walked into his office and he had a Michigan football helmet on his shelf, which just played so well. Number one, I'm a big football fan. Number two, my wife went to Michigan. I was like, wow, this is the perfect setup. And I was like, wow, you're a Wolverines fan. And at the time I knew, how the team was doing and, the recruits and all these different things just because I had followed it. And he was just like stone cold. I was trying to warm him up with his football talk and he just would not bite on it. So his first question to me was, so tell me why you want to be in investment banking. And I remember the context here is second year of business school, right? So I didn't interview for the internship, which that's usually those are the guys they talk to. Tell me why you be in investment banking. And that's like just a layup. Everyone on this podcast, you're going to prepare for that question, right? You're going to know it. So I gave my spiel and boy, it felt good. I'd done it many times. And then he said, that sounded very rehearsed. So tell me again why you want to be in investment banking, but don't use any of the reasons you just said. Right. And that was that gives you a little window into how the dynamics of that interview for the next, whatever it was, 45 minutes. And it was painful. Right. And he just didn't buy it. He didn't buy that as a second year student that I just showed up and said, now, in retrospect, I don't know if he didn't buy it, but he played that card because he wanted me to be uncomfortable. He wanted me to fight for it. He wanted me to see what happened when, question one didn't lead to question two, which led to question three, and then I was done. Right. And then at the end of that time, what is you as the interviewer, what insight do you really have? You've regurgitated what's on the resume, right? Mm-hmm. Now, not everyone does that. Some people follow the traditional structure, but, don't be surprised if that happens. Anyway, I ended up getting the job. So I obviously didn't fail out of the interview. I felt as though I failed out of the interview at the end. But so it's cliche, but I think, it's a job that there are some time pressures. There's some intensity, and there will be times without a doubt that you will feel overwhelmed, especially when you start. I can remember that first, for me, it was probably about 18 months. I think for most of my colleagues, it was about a 12-month period where you're just in over your head. I mean, stuff is flying at you faster than you can consume it. And I would, my boss would come by my desk and it's 4:30 in the afternoon and he'd say, "Hey, Scott, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. And, let's take a look at it tomorrow." He'd walk away. I'd open Google and say, and, just Google 3 of the words he just used because I didn't even know what the words meant. Right. So I had to first figure out what the words were and then figure out what the task he was asking me to do. And that can be overwhelming. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's also fun because you learn a ton. But I promise you, at the time, I did not think it was fun.
Yeah.
So I think it's, as you mentioned, as we talked about, I mean, it's showing that you can be a go-to person. It's being yourself and being inspired and showing that inspiration whenever you are inspired by. And it's kind of proving that you can deal with some of the stresses and pressures of it. You need to show you can do the technical work.
Yeah.
But, going back to this unconscious bias thing, which I started with, everyone has their own. I'm talking a lot about kind of what I have experienced, but there might be someone you interview and they're like, you know what? In order to be a good associate, I need this candidate to have a year of finance exposure. And if I showed up at that interview, I'm not going to get that job. And it's kind of okay, right? I mean, you got to present yourself the way you can be. I wouldn't want to go work for that person anyway, because I'd be setting myself up for failure.
Right.
Right. So it is I would encourage all of your listeners to think of the recruiting process as a two-way street. It is hard to do because there are a limited number of spots, but just in the back of your mind, consider, is this right for me too?
Yeah.
And I'll use a couple examples on that train of thought, which is I didn't get my full-time offer until May of the second year of business school. We finished business school in May, right? I mean, that's when the classes concluded. So I literally had 2 full years of looking for a job. There were some of my classmates who, looked for a job for 3 months, got the internship, got their full-time offer. They had the entire second year to hang out and do whatever they want. But I will tell you, if you step back and think about it for a second, I feel very lucky to have landed where I did. In a lot of ways, it was luck, as I said, but I found a spot in a group of people that I've meshed well with and I really liked and was inspired by and was able to contribute to. I found a good spot. Many of my classmates in banking, and some of it's just the turnover that's inherent in the business, but many of my classmates got that full-time offer. They had a great second year of relaxing and not worrying about job offer. And then a year after business school, they picked their head up and they're like, I don't like this. I don't like my group. I'm not being challenged. This is too intense for me. Whatever it is, it's not the right job. And then you've got to find a job 18 months out of business school, which a lot of people do. It's not the end of the world. But, you got to find a job outside the friendly confines of the business school, right?
Yeah.
Where they just lay out career opportunities for you.
Yes.
It's a great place to look for a job.
Yeah.
18 months after business school, I mean, you can call up your business school and they'll help you, but it's just harder.
Yeah.
And you're working full time at that point too. So I would say it behoove your listeners to think about the right fit as opposed to the first fit. Right?
Yes. And did you ever get grilled in these interviews? Like, technically, in terms of the technical part of the interview, Scott, you're a professional baseball player.
I definitely got grilled.
Yeah.
I still have some uncomfortable nightmares about the first one who asked me about the weighted average cost of capital. And I had seen it, but I had never actually, worked with it. I never understood the concept. And they were like, okay, here's a company. Tell me how you calculate the weighted average cost of capital. And I made up something on the spot and walked out of the interview and went back to think about it and did some research. And I was like, okay. Everything I just said was absolutely wrong. So, I guess a couple lessons there. Number one, if you don't know, don't pretend you know, because the person who asked the question does know.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
so a better answer, and I've had these in interviews that I've given to people that have received the offer, they've said, I don't know that concept, but I'd like to, let me kind of talk you through how to approach it. Let me ask you a couple questions. And let me, because the goal of the interview, if you think about it, is really just helping the interviewer understand how a person thinks, right? It's problem solving. Regurgitation does kind of little to really help. So in a weird way, and again, you'd have to find the right interviewer. There's probably a lot of interviewers that say you got to get that question right or else you're not considered. But it could be an advantage with the right interviewer if you say, they ask you a question you don't know the answer to, and you say, I don't know. Yeah. But I'd like to think through this. So here's what I do know, right? Let's start there. Let me ask you a couple questions. Okay. I know weighted average cost of capital deals with, a mix of debt and whatever you do know, a mix of debt capital and equity capital. Here's what I know. But let me ask you, when are you using this in the job so I can help you help you understand the way I'm thinking about it. And that would have been a better answer than trying to make something up because it was wrong. It was definitely wrong.
Yeah, got it. But you, in other words, even though you didn't have that background, you did major in economics, right? As an undergrad.
I did.
I mean,
I think there's some relevance. Honestly, I don't think, so I went to Stanford, for undergrad. Stanford on purpose doesn't have specific majors. There's no business major, for example.
Got it.
The school of thought is we're going to kind of develop your overall thinking pattern and allow you to tackle problems in the real world. That's an education philosophy, Darren. You're probably much more skilled at talking about that than I am. But I think the point is I didn't learn specific skills as an undergrad. Right. So no one out there should think, well, I don't know the concepts from school, so I'm at a disadvantage. Don't worry about that. You do need to study though. Okay. Yeah. So what are ways you can study? So there's a lot of great, free online resources. So, Wharton, I don't know if they still do, but at the time they handed out these things called wet feet guides. Have you ever heard of those, Darren?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So there's a bunch of different study guides. A lot of the schools, and I'll tell you a story about this one because there's pros and cons of this. A lot of the schools will have their interviewees finish their interview and then aggregate questions that they got. And some can be very detailed. So there'll be like a study guide. Here's the questions that Wells Fargo Securities asked. Here's the questions that Citi asked. Here's the questions that Morgan Stanley asked. The risk there, as you might expect, the banks pretty quickly figure out if I ask you a question and it's the exact same answer as the one that I asked the candidate before, it's like, okay, you guys got the word on this one, right? So, and that can be, it's not a strike against you. It's just kind of like, I don't know, it's the lazy way or something, right? But do that, use those resources, see the questions, figure things out. I think good interviewers will tweak it so it's not purely regurgitation. Yeah. There's another interview strategy where there'll be more like brain teasers. I would recommend, and this is in a weird way, a little bit more like the consulting interview path, but just when maybe you need a break from like the technical studying part, maybe just, Google or look online for some resources about, interview brain teasers just to get your mind working like that. I was always one that enjoyed those.
You love that stuff.
I always loved those. Yeah. You remember.
I remember.
But you just kind of you need to have your brain in the right space to do that. If it's like, okay, what's weighted average cost of capital? What's a DCF? How do you project cash flows? Oh, and then, there's a lily pad that doubles in size every, 3 seconds and a pond that's 100 square yards, and you're just like, oh boy, I'm lost. So it's good just to kind of keep yourself balanced. Not everyone will do it. I will tell you, and this is a little bit of a little inside tip. I will tell you that, and this is probably more relevant to the bulge brackets. I think bulge brackets, because we're big and because we touch a lot of students, there is a concern of protecting, litigation risk. If a candidate feels they're treated unfairly, there could be risks to the firm, right? I think we can all understand that concept. So there has been a push over the last couple of years to kind of stay within the confines of a typical interviewer. It's less so the case today of getting these off the wall, obscure questions, just because I think a candidate could say, you asked me a question that there's no way you could ask any other candidate, and therefore you treated me unfairly. And HR and legal just thinks about that stuff. I don't know how much it plays in. I've seen that push.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, something to think about. It's worth the time. Do the wet feet guides. Look at online for these. There's a couple good resources. I'm trying to think of them. I can't think off the top of my head, but
okay.
Like investment banking interview guides.
Yeah.
And there's one. It's called Macabus, Macabus, I think, where this is a resource that some of the analysts will use. I told you when the boss comes up and gives them a task and they have no idea how to do it.
Yes.
And
Genius.
It'll be like, look up keywords. And it's built by a couple ex-analysts that went off and started their own business, entrepreneurs, and left after 2 years and said, here's a service we could provide. And I think it's done really well. That's a good resource. What are analysts thinking about? What are associates asking about? There's like topics, there's discussion threads, there's practice models, there's all kinds of stuff on it. I think that's how you spell it. Check that, but I think that's how you spell it.
Yeah, and I'll link to all the links Scott mentioned in the show notes of this episode, and I'll follow up with Scott too and list some more helpful links in the show notes. Scott, let me ask you one more specific question before ending with a couple more general questions.
Great.
Office recruiting and location. How does that play into investment banking? Because I know you started in New York and now you're in LA.
That's right. And that definitely varies by location, by office. So I think it'll come to no one's surprise that the most investment banking opportunities are in New York. That's really kind of the center of I would probably say finance world, but definitely investment banking world. So the most opportunities in New York. But different banks, you have to consider different banks. So for example, Wells Fargo is a long time, one of the world's largest financial institutions. We gained our investment banking capabilities through the acquisition of Wachovia in 2009. That was when investment banking started for Wells Fargo. Wachovia was based in Charlotte, North Carolina. So really the hub for our investment banking platform is Charlotte. So I bring that up because when you're interviewing for Wells Fargo, you need to know that. You need to not go in the interview and say, boy, I can't wait to be in New York. Now, if it's really New York or bust, it's probably a good idea to introduce that pretty early on. I still wouldn't enter the room and say, I'm only interested in New York. What I'd say is I'm interested in Wells Fargo, and here's why. I know there are several different options and different groups and different platforms. I'm interested in learning more. Here's what I do know because I've talked to X, Y, and Z, but I want to learn more. Keep your doors open.
Right.
Get that first introduction. It's a turnoff if the candidate walks in and says, hey, I'm going to call the shots here, and I want to be New York debt capital markets, or I'm out. That's just not a good way to open it.
Yeah.
But your question was, how did the different locations change? So I started in New York. I've been in Los Angeles for 3 years. I was in New York for about 3.5 years. I've been here in LA for about 3.5 years. So New York investment banking it's structured similar to kind of how I was explaining Bulge bracket versus the boutique route. It's just structured. I think the groups are very clearly defined. And most of your listeners probably understand this, but there's really kind of two career paths in investment banking when you start. One is coverage, which is you focus on a specific industry. And within that, we talked about a little bit this up front, but within that industry, you can kind of provide all three of the investment banking products, M&A, debt, and equity, to that industry. So that's bucket one, industry specific coverage. Or bucket two is product specific, which would be you spend all your time in M&A, you spend all your time in debt, you spend all your time in equity. So you choose one of those two paths. And then New York, it's just structured. It's a for sure 2-year analyst program with an optional third. Associates, which this is more relevant to your audience, but the associates, it's 3 or 4 years. There's been a move in recent years where it's more like 4 years at the associate level before being up for promotion. Honestly, I don't think it matters that much. I guess all things being equal, everyone wants to get promoted earlier and, enjoy the increase in pay and all that stuff. But, 3 or 4 years, it's fine when you're kind of setting your foundation. And the other thing about it that I think is most relevant to this specific discussion is most of the shops in New York, and maybe even all, I can't say all, but the vast majority would have the structured on-campus recruiting process. I'll tell you the way Wells does it, and I think this is how the other schools do it or other firms do it because I've talked to my friend and colleagues at different places. But we'll have what we call core schools. So to list a couple core schools at Wharton or at Wells Fargo, Wharton's one, UVA, HBS, Columbia. You get the picture. I mean, they pick, I don't know how many, but they just can't spend dedicated resources at every campus across the MBA spectrum.
Is it less than 10 schools? Or around?
I would say around 10.
10. Okay. Somewhere around that.
Yeah. And I can look into that a little. That could be on my to-do list.
Yeah.
But the moral of the story is, for those 10 schools, call it, they're going to be on campus. At Wharton, you show up day one and they're like, look, these banks are on campus, this, and that's great. In the other schools, the way we approach it is there'll be a write-in process. So you at a different school, like, you need to do your homework and know when the resume drop is. There's an opportunity, but there's not going to be someone on campus telling you, if you want to go to Wells Fargo Securities, you need to get your resume on this date. We post it. It's on our site. It's accessible to everybody, but you need to do a little bit more homework yourself. Do you have a better chance of getting it from one of the core schools? Probably, but a little bit of homework and you can level the playing field pretty easily, because I'll tell you, if I've got a candidate from a core school who just dumped his or her resume in and it shows up in a resume bundle, versus I've got someone from a non-core school who has called me and talked to me and told me that I am very interested and I want to learn how I get in this process, it's kind of nice. I already know that person. Yeah. Right? So it gives you an advantage, but it takes a little more work to do it. And look, I was there. I was 100% in, your listener's shoes. It can be a little uncomfortable, right? I mean, there's a lot of cold calling involved in this. You got to you got to be comfortable with someone saying, "I'm sorry, it's no," and sometimes you just get a flat no. You'll call them and say, "You know what? I'm sorry, we don't have spots this year. We don't recruit at your school. Look again next year." Whatever, you're going to get a lot of those, right? But that doesn't mean you can't call, and it doesn't mean you can't call someone else from that same institution. Honestly, you just go to someone else and see if you can get in. So it takes a little bit of extra work. Yep. New York is very structured. I will tell you, in LA, it is much less structured. So first of all, LA doesn't just have the investment banking scale. I think about the shops in our market, and we've got Moelis has a presence here, Houlihan has a presence here, Harris Williams has a presence here. But those are predominantly sell-side M&A. Bank of America does some, but they don't do. Our model is really a regional model where we cover a territory, which is probably a discussion for another day. Yeah. But we have, we try to get 2 or 3 associate internships for the year, because UCLA and USC are close. Like, that's a natural place to start. But I think about our candidates now. I mean, we've got Yale, Columbia, Wharton, UVA, UCLA. I mean, we draw from a diverse MBA background and undergrad. I named a couple of those up front of our undergrad schools, but just because we don't have the structured program like they do in New York, so it's a little bit more on us. Our office is a little smaller too, so I think finding the cultural fit might be a little more important. I hesitate to say more important, but it's still very important. We kind of want to make sure that the candidate coming in, the intern coming in, is a good fit for our office. In New York, it's a little bit more, we got to fill a bunch of spots. Let's just load them up with a ton of people, and the kind of the cream will rise to the top type thing. Yeah. So look, when your candidates are thinking about location, you think about the cities that have opportunities. New York's the biggest. Charlotte, there's a lot. So Bank of America is always also based in Charlotte. So you've got Charlotte, you got Bank of America and Wells Fargo. San Francisco has a good presence. Chicago's got a number of shops. Most of those are M&A from my experience, but those are kind of the big ones. And then you'll have, if you go to the boutique route, then you'll have some opportunities to get to some smaller cities. Yeah. But, the big one, Boston, the big ones are kind of, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Chicago.
Yeah. No, that's clear. And actually, do you guys recruit international students as well? Like, I'm kind of curious because we have a lot of international listeners, and I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on that. Investment banking being, yes, please.
So there are a lot of great attributes for working for Wells Fargo Securities. One of the parts that we struggle with a little bit, our presence from an investment banking business perspective is predominantly in the U.S. Yeah. The reason that is, as I mentioned, is we acquired investment banking capabilities through the acquisition of Wachovia in 2009. The leaders of Wells Fargo at the time, Dick Dragicevich was the CEO at the time. He basically said, look, we're going to sell this business. This is not what Wells Fargo is. We're Main Street, not Wall Street. This is not what we want to do. The reason he ended up keeping it and growing it and grown it to what it is today after a couple successors, but is because he thought we'll provide this suite of services to our existing lending relationships. And Wells Fargo has just traditionally been a lending institution to the continental U.S. So I should just say the U.S. in general, right? So that is our sweet spot. So I lay that whole thing out because I don't think Wells Fargo Securities is probably the best platform for an international candidate, just given the predominance of our business in the U.S. But we're kind of the minority there. I mean, all of the other banks are very supportive and actively pursue expanding kind of international capabilities, both from a talent perspective and also business perspective. I think the Wells Fargo strategic objectives has remained focused a little bit more domestic, but that may change over time too. I mean, that's just where we are now. I think it's a great business for both MBA students internationally and in the U.S. There's a lot of opportunities to learn about business and finance, which is the best part of the business. If you're asking me what I like most about this job, I would say number one is the people. I think for whatever reason, the industry attracts very bright, talented, in my experience, very caring, collaborative people. I think about one of my closest.
But that goes against all the stereotypes, right?
It does.
People say about investment banking. You're supposed to be working with Gordon Gekko and
it does.
The Wolf of Wall Street and all these guys.
And I will say it's group specific, right? I'll tell you, this is definitely from the Scott lens right now. I landed in a group that it was a great group of people, men and women, most of whom I'm still very close with today. It can be competitive. I don't want to make it sound like it's all kumbaya. Like that, you are competing for business. You go and, create a pitch for a company and it's you versus, Citi and JP Morgan and all that. I mean, you win or lose, right? So it is very competitive, but it's a group of people that you just can't help learn from. And even the people you don't get along with, you almost can't help to learn from them because they're just smart, intelligent, and very driven people. So people is number one. And number two, I think and this is probably cliche, but it is very true, I'm 7 years in. I still consider that, well, for the average, I think I've stayed longer than the average investment banker, but it's seemingly no 2 days are the same. I mean, you are challenged because market conditions change, because investment angles change, because macroeconomic factors change, because just a host of reasons makes the environment ever changing. And then not only that, but the other great part about the job is, and an analyst has a role, and you know what? The associate role is different than the analyst, and the VP role, which is where I am now, is different than the associate role. And the director is different and the managing director is different. Like I am much more client facing than I was an associate. Associate there for a couple of years, you're really the quarterback of preparing the materials for the client facing presentation. You need to know everything in that book. You need to know it down pat, and everything needs to be right. And then someone else goes and presents it. Right. And so, but then as soon as you kind of master that set of skills, then they ask you to go and present it. So you got to be able to kind of multitask and manage the process and make you're sure that your associate is doing all the things that you did as an associate. Right. And then you got to prepare yourself to be in front of a client and all of the challenges and, exhilarating moments that comes from presenting and being someone in a personal interaction. But that evolution of the job, I think, is really a great aspect of the job. So because of that, I think, people and always learning and evolving are kind of the two things that I like most.
And the worst part of the job?
Worst part is there is sacrifices to, whatever you want to call it, work-life balance, personal interaction. You learn a lot, but you give a lot too. Right? I mean, there are times you lose control of your schedule, especially for the first couple of years as an associate. Patrice, my wife, and I still I would say laugh and cry about times where it's, we were planning on, going to a wedding or going away for the weekend. And Friday night at 6:30, I call her and I'm like, I'm not coming home and I can't go. Yeah. And that's tough. Yeah. And honestly, your loved ones need to be in on this whole process with you because, there are times where it just doesn't seem fair. It's not fair. It's not that it seems fair. It's not fair. I think in general, I think the industry is getting better at that. And I think one of the reasons we're getting better about, treating especially the analysts and associates better with kind of more, I don't know, what's reasonable terms is because things like tech and some of these startup environments have changed the way that people realize that people can work. And we're trying to attract the best talent. And you got someone sitting on a beanbag chair at Google and then we're saying you can't go home for the weekend. Like that's only going to last so long. Yeah. So there is some evolution, but there's also kind of this old school mentality that you got an MD who's been doing this job for 20 years and he or she went through the ringer when they were an associate. Right. So they're going to put their associate through the ringer. Yeah. And some of that you just can't get around. So that's the worst part. And, frankly, some people go in and they work as an associate. I think it is a great industry to learn a ton in a short couple number of years. And then if you want to go do something else because you want a little bit more control over your schedule, then great. I think investment bankers kind of expect that a lot of our analysts and associates do that. And that's okay. I would highly encourage everyone. This is the Wells Fargo recruiter in me, but to live up to your promise, whatever you say, if it's 2 years, live up to your promise for 2 years. I think that sets you up for your next role. And if you do what you say you're going to do and do a good job, you create a resource, an advocate for wherever you go next in life. And I think that's very valuable. But if you show up and 6 months later, you're miserable and you can't do it, get out. Yeah. I mean, that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. There's lots of other things to do too. So I love the industry. I love the job. I think it is a great career path that exposes people and opens up avenues for all kinds of different career paths, and whether it be in finance or whatever other industry. But it's not for everybody. Yeah. No, I really appreciate that, the honesty there. And my last question, I promise, this has been such a great conversation, is like when you look at the leaders in investment banking right now, or the people you look up to, whether that's, someone superior to you or just in the industry or your colleagues, like what do applicants need to know about succeeding in this industry? You've been in it 7 years, you're a VP now. Like, I just love to hear your thoughts there. Well, that's a good one. I felt like I'd heard all these questions. I think you got me on one. No, that's a great question. I think what I've learned is people in this industry are motivated by a ton of different factors. And I think you could probably say the same for other industries, but I'll just lay out a couple specific examples in this one. And I think the lesson is, you can't really make an assumption on why someone does it. So, True. One of the, being totally frank, one of the draws of this industry is you get paid well. Yeah. Okay. So there are some people that are in this industry purely for the paycheck. And I don't know if I'm not passing judgment on that. I think, it's capitalism and that's what they're doing and that's fine. I think there's some people in the industry that, whether they've been doing it for a long time or, they done something on the side or whatever, the paycheck is maybe not the most important. I'm sure it's nice, but it's not the most important priority. I think there are some people that approach this and say, we are a service business, which we are. We are client facing, and the client says jump, we say absolutely, right? I mean, that's why, going back to that schedule uncertainty thing, it seems like it's unreasonable that your boss could show up at 6 on a Friday and say, I'm sorry, we have to work all weekend. And you say to the boss, like, okay, boss, why didn't you think about that on Tuesday? Well, it may be because the client just called, right? Right. So, and there are some, people that have been doing investment banking for a long time, and they take great pride in just being a provider of services to a client. And, think about other service providers, whether it be your insurance guy or your family wealth planner or your, pick a service. And I think there are people that do it well oftentimes are kind of passionate about doing what's right for the client.
Yeah.
So that could be the motivation. And I think, as an associate, you have to kind of create your own path and learn from your boss. My first boss in New York, who was a mentor of mine, he will forever be someone who I view as really changing my life for the better. I respect the heck out of him. I'm very different than he is. Like I'm not going to run, my business like he ran it in all aspects. In some aspects, absolutely. Not in all aspects. So it's kind of, you got to kind of learn from, why people are motivated, what they do well, what you would do differently, and kind of create your own brand. And at the end of the day, if this is a career that you want to stay in, that's really what you're doing. You're developing your skills as an associate so that you can be a good presenter of materials, so that you can be a trusted, service provider to your clients. And those are successful MDs when, they're just great service providers. So that's a long-winded way of answering it, but I think that kind of covers it.
No, that's awesome. Let's end it there. Thank you so much, Scott, for jumping on the show, and hopefully you can maybe point some people who asked you for advice to this episode as well.
Absolutely. This was a bunch of fun. I hope people can tell from listening. This is something I'm definitely passionate about, and I hope this is beneficial, and I look forward to being as helpful as I can to you and your listeners.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Darren.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number one school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.